Okay, with that out of the way, get the technical stuff out of the way. Welcome, thank you, Kip. Where are you located, by the way?
I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina area
Oh, North
currently.
Carolina. Okay, you're on the opposite side of the country from me. I'm here out in California at the moment. Anyway, well, let's just get started with a little bit about your background, if you don't mind. And again, thanks for doing this. Can you tell us a little background? I have you quite an
Yeah.
interesting story. So if you can kind of maybe share that with us, that'd be great.
Yeah. In a nutshell, the whole thing is I was suicidal as a kid, as young as 8 years old, and stayed that way through my teenage years and even into my early 20s. And then, finally one day it's kind of like this thought process isn't working for me very well. So maybe I should try something else. And started looking for answers, started turning my life around. And then when I found out I was going to be a parent for the first time, I, uh, I wanted to figure out. I knew there was a lot of stuff, a lot of skeletons lingering in the closet, and I didn't want to dress my kids up out of any baggage I was carrying around. So I uh, I started going out looking for answers. I'd been to doctors and therapists and counselors and all this stuff before, and they just kept wanting to keep me on meds and everything. And so the journey I went through took me a lot into like psychology and neuroscience, but then also as well as I started learning more about nutrition and started cleaning that up, I kind of combined the two in my own lifestyle and regimen and help heal all that. But along the way, I started getting people reaching out to me for um, different coaching and mentoring as they saw improvements in my life. And so yeah, it became now I actually mentor and train coaches in various neuroscience and psychological techniques, help with things like PTSD, phobias, food addictions, all that. Help people really understand the mental and emotional link to it. Um, and yeah, it's kind of taken me all over the world and got to be a part of some really cool stuff with clients and groups, and now here I am.
Yeah, and certainly we see there's a huge mental aspect that we deal with in this community too. I mean, we have a lot of people with addiction issues and other psychological issues that are they often are take a long time to resolve. But let me ask you, because you said starting at 8 years old, life isn't worth living. Suicidal. It's not something you typically associate with kids, although we are seeing more of that. Usually when you're a kid, I mean, hell, the world's fun. I mean, it's a big world's a giant playground. When you get older, you got responsibilities and you're beat up and you don't feel so good. That's when most people start to wonder. I mean, there's a lot of people that are just they get to 60, 70 years old and they're like waiting to die. It's like, and why do you think, as an 8-year-old kid, this was what you were doing, or what was going on there? Do you have any idea, any insight into that now with
Yeah.
respect why that was the case, perhaps?
Yeah, and I would dive into it deeper all the time, looking for more answers because I've got three kids of my own, and when they became 8 years old, I noticed I would have some emotion tingling around inside of um, and getting really aware of where they are versus where I was at, and it's and even now, like my oldest is 13, and so man, I remember the thoughts that were going through my head at that time, and it's like to see someone, such an innocent, just pure being, and it's like, wow, what was it that shifted me to that? And a lot of it was just the environment I was in, and then my dad was an alcoholic among other things, and he was what's considered now as physically abusive. We just called it discipline back then, but we didn't know any better. And then my mom was on the other end. She never really got physical. Um, but she would just constantly remind you of everything you'd done wrong, over and over. And they weren't around much. My sister was born when I was like 7.5 years old, and I was left at home to take care of her while my parents were out. Like my dad made it very clear he never wanted to be a parent, and that I was a complete mistake, and that my sister was the only kid he ever wanted out of six of us that we knew of. He was a bit of a womanizer, and um, and my dad was very entrepreneurial, very driven. One of the strongest mindsets I've actually ever known. Just a lot of toxicity in his thinking and behavior. But he uh, he didn't. He had his own baggage that you know. The way he saw to get ahead was work really hard, but also he was dealing in stolen goods and bootlegging moonshine and dealing drugs and different things. So the people who were around as my role models were always the type of people my parents were telling me they never to associate with, yet they were always around the house. You know, some of my dad's friends would be abusive. I was molested when I was 4, attempted again at 15. Luckily I was big enough to fight that guy off. But it was just, yeah, it was a very negative environment. And, you know, as kids, we take everything personal, and I took it all on to mean something about me. But luckily I did have my sister around then, and I've always been very protective of, you know, people in my circle. And I had this idea that my reason for being was to protect her from that. So I was like, I've got to stay around until she's strong enough. And luckily, by the time I believed we had reached that age, I had started to shift, you know, my mindset and my thought process and the way I was showing up, and started choosing to protect myself the way I was hurt, so to speak. But yeah, it is sad. I do hear more and more stories of children being that in that deep depression or even suicidal state now at that age, and it's really, really heartbreaking. The more I've learned about nutrition too, our diet growing up was all carb and fried food based, and so I know that was some of it too. Is just, you know, being in that lower vibration. So it was the physical aspect, it was the mental, it was the emotional. You know, under constant stress there, and my health was terrible when I was a kid. So it was just a link of everything, never really feeling up, never feeling that vibrancy. You know.
I'm going to interject, and then I'll get back to this just because it made me think of something I hadn't thought of in a few years. And so you mentioned moonshine in North Carolina with your dad. And this is kind of a funny story, and I know this isn't a funny topic, but I'll interject here just for some levity here. But when I was in the Air Force back in 1992, I was stationed at a place called Vandenberg Air Force Base out in near San Luis Obispo, north of that. And my job was to launch nuclear bombs. And I had a buddy who was my partner. We were partnered as a crew, and you would work together, and you would have to do these, you know, these checklists. You know, if somebody sent you a decoded message, you had to go through this very, very detailed checklist and, you know, double check and check. And it was a very rapid series of things you had to do. It was like check, previous accomplished, NA, you know, but it was just a flow that had happened, and it needed to be very quick. And, you know, you had a certain amount of time to launch a nuclear bomb. You know, it's like, you know, we need to be able to get this done in X amount of time. I think the time is classified, perhaps it may still be, I don't know. But I had a buddy, his name was Neil George. And I was confused because I couldn't remember if it was George Neil or Neil George, because his first name was his last name, his last name was first. He's from North Carolina. And his dad would send him moonshine, and I was like, man, I ain't drinking that shit. You know, it's just it was just funny stuff. But I remember, but the funny thing is, you know, and I'm not to make fun, but some people talk fast and some people have a real slow way of talking, you know, and Neil's one of these guys that just really, really slow. And it was just funny. I was paired with this guy, and our job was to get these nuclear bombs off the ground as rapidly as possible. And it was a lot of verbal communication. He was always, okay, check. You know, that was driving me crazy with Neil George. I just remember that. I'm like, I got a guy that can't talk fast. We're supposed to talk fast, but it was funny. I'm just laughing about that. So anyway,
Yeah, there's a lot of that in that area.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's just the way different people talk different speeds. And it's
Yeah.
just funny. You know, you hear some people like, some people will hear like, perhaps Spanish, and it just seems like, you know, in fact, they're talking a mile a minute, and you can't keep up with them. But, anyway, so back to the story, and obviously the nutritional side, you know, we have I think a lot of people within this community have discovered by fixing their diet, their mental health improves. And you know, we see what kids are subjected to. And I don't know how old you are. I mean, I grew up in the 1970s where I was eating, you know, cereal and skim milk and fried, you know, I mean, processed food with oils and all that crap. And although it was probably a better diet than the kids are growing up on today, in retrospect, even though it was still horrible back when I was there. But, anyway, so sorry to interject. I hopefully didn't throw you off your game, but let's continue. So you made these discoveries. You know, you obviously you grew up in an environment where you know it would be challenging. You know, no one wants to grow up in an abusive environment, and that certainly is going to you know, not make for maybe a lot of happiness, I suppose. But so how did it change for you? I mean, obviously, you're still here, so hopefully you're not struggling with any of those mental health issues anymore, but what were the things that you discovered that helped you? And then we can talk about maybe perhaps broaden it for a more general population?
You know, a lot of whatever it kind of woke me up. I was in my mid to late 20s, I guess, and I realized, I look back, I had actually planned. My dad died when I was 15, and my mom had came to me. We grew up very poor, and especially once he was out of the picture, that was the foundation of the income. All the stuff he was doing, whether it was illegal or not. So it all kind of ceased because they had a small business that they were running, but it had burned down. They didn't have insurance. And then 2 weeks later, he passed away, and, he was a chain smoker, ate like crap. And I never once in my life ever saw him take a drink of anything that wasn't just hard liquor, except for black coffee. But even that, he would pour like some moonshine in, or some Canadian Club, something like that. And so yeah, after he passed away, my mom came to me, and I was in such a low place. I was thinking about just dropping out of school because I never showed up anyway. And the only goal I'd ever set for myself in my first 20 years was to end my life. That was it. So not a lot of ambition at that time, because I just never believed anything was possible. And my mom came to me and she's like, if you'll stay in school, she's like, you could repeat 12th grade, or fail at any point and just stay in an extra year, and I'll get an extra year of Social Security money. And I, at the time, still just wanted love and acceptance so bad, like we all tend to do at younger ages or all through life. And so I was like, well, maybe now I'll finally be accepted and all of that. And, and everybody had told me at the funeral and everything, I'm the man of the house. So it's like, I felt obligated. And then I was like, well, at least here I can bring some value. And it's funny how things work out, whether you're spiritual and you believe that, Lord works in mysterious ways, or you're an atheist and just think, there's coincidences and all this amazing stuff just happens, whatever it is. That brought me to meet a man who was in his second year of teaching, and it was his first year at my school, and his name was Coach Calderon. And for whatever reason, one day I skipped class, and all I needed was his course to actually graduate. But again, I didn't see the point, because I was like, well, as soon as the insurance or the Social Security check stops, I have no value to add. I have no reason to continue living. And my sister was finally at an age where I believe she was good, but I was at a point where I couldn't take it anymore. And I'm just maybe 3 months away from the end of the school year. And all I needed was that half a credit, but I wasn't showing up and I wasn't doing any work. But I would show up just enough so that they would permanently kick me out of school, so the check would continue coming. And Coach held me after class one day and told me, he had some papers in his hand, so I knew they were transcripts. I'd had several teachers tell me what a lost cause and a waste of time I was, and how I was not ever going to amount to anything. So I knew the drill. So I didn't even look him in the eye. I didn't look at him at all. I was too scared to look anybody in the eye at that point. Didn't feel enough of myself that I was worthy to do that. But he came up, dropped him in front of me, and we just tapped on him real quick. And he's like, I know nothing about you. You never show up. He's like, you never participate in class. You never do anything. He's like, I don't know a thing about you. I don't know what's going on at home. I don't know what happens in your life outside of this classroom. But what I do know is this is not you. And I won't accept this kind of crap from you anymore. And I'm not going to allow you to accept it from yourself. And then he just sat there and, for probably 10 seconds, but it felt like days to me, because nobody had ever said anything like that to me. And he's like, you can leave whenever you want. He's like, I was just letting you know. I was delivering a message. And I got up and sprinted out of the room because I felt so uncomfortable. But something happened and I started showing up. He was my second period. I would actually not come to first period, break into school, basically sneak through security and everything, go to his class, and then ditch the rest of school. But I showed up to his class every single day the rest of the year, and I ended up graduating. And then the day came that, I had planned on ending my life, and I didn't. And like I say, it took me until I was in my mid to late 20s to all of a sudden just kind of realize one day, I was doing really well in a business. I had my first son, my second kid was on the way. And I was just having, I had one of those moments that was like, damn, I never thought life would turn out this way. And no one else did, not for me, and I was like, what in the world happened? Because I was dead set on not being here at this time. And I went back and I realized, wow, in that 20-second conversation, that one guy who knew nothing about me and had all the evidence in the world and all these colleagues of his telling him that I was a lost cause and a waste of time, he chose to see something different. And because of that, it's like, I have these kids now. I have, you know, at the time was, you know, had a career better than anything I thought I would have. And it's like, I had the house, picket fence, you know, all that stuff. And it's like, never thought this was possible for me. So it really opened my eyes up to realize the impact we can really have with one another and ourselves. And, you know, it was the thought process. And in psychology, what he did is, you know, they call a pattern interrupt. And it's something really simple, but it just kind of throws us off that track that we've been running long enough for some, you know, in the state of confusion, we can plant a seed. And so he did that and, you know, planted a seed of possibility in the most ninjistic way I've ever experienced. And it not only kept me around, but actually turned me around to start thinking of, yeah, I don't have to be this way anymore. Like I can choose how I think. Like, yeah, crap happens all the time, but I don't have to keep shoveling it on myself. It's like I can take a shower and I can get out of the manure pit or whatever. And that started sending me down the road to understand, what in the world did he do? Why did it have such an impact so quickly? And how can I do more of that? And I never got into any of this expecting to be a coach, or much less a coach to other coaches. It all just started, I wanted to heal myself and make sure I didn't raise my kids to turn into the same way as me. And, you know, to this day, my favorite testimonials actually come from, you know, I've got a 13-year-old, he just hit yesterday 10,000 followers on his Instagram, and it's all about fitness and health and mindset. And he has so many teenagers older than him reaching out saying, you know, I wanted to commit suicide, but your page inspired me. And now I've gone from this flabby kid that everybody bullied to I'm in shape and I feel good about myself and I've got friends. And it's like, I get chills thinking about it, because it's like, damn, when I was his age, I wanted to see the world burn and I wanted to end my own life so bad I couldn't take it. And here he is inspiring life. And, you know, I've got two others, you know, just a couple years behind him, and they're on the same path. And it's been a real testament to me of what's really possible. And, you know, it's never too late to make an improvement. And now, you know, I was more stressed as a kid than I am now. And I live more of a kid's life than I ever did as a kid. You know, it's like I have way more fun, way more fulfillment in my life. And, you know, one of my favorite quote unquote gurus was Dr. Wayne Dyer. And, you know, he always said, it's never too late to have a happy childhood. And the first time I ever heard that, I was like, you have no effing clue what you're talking about, old man. But now I look back and I was like, damn, I know exactly what he's talking about. It's, I have more enjoyment and pleasure in my life now, more of that childlike exploration and you know, authenticity than I ever did as a kid. And it's all just, I had 10 times more stress than I actually had, you know, outside world, but it's like, it's just looking at it different, you know, having choosing how I see it and how I interact with it.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing. I've got several kids. I've got 4 kids, and you kind of, it's almost like you're excited that they get to play with stuff because you get to do it too. You're kind of, it's pretty cool. Let's go check this out. These little kid things are still pretty cool, and they've gotten really, some of the stuff is really cool. Let me ask you about, because we father with an alcoholic. Did you ever have any issues with addictions, drugs, alcohol?
Yeah.
Is that part of the deal?
Yeah. I picked up all the ones he had, and then I was always a bit of an extremist and overachiever. So I went above and beyond anything I witnessed him doing. So when I was 15, I had multiple bottles of liquor like stashed around the yard or house or even neighborhood. And I would drink several shots at night, just trying to quiet the voices in my head so I could go to sleep. And then, I was smoking when I was in middle school and smoked all the way until my mid 20s. Then, and it was, quite the chain smoker. And then in my early 20s, I started, in my teenage years, I was sneaking like antidepressants and anxiety meds that they give my mom after my dad passed away. She wouldn't take them, so I was taking them. And then just anything trying to, because I didn't even know what they were, but I saw antidepressant. And I was like, well, I'm depressed. I want to be anti what that is, which was, I thought, happiness. but that's not how those work, as we all know. They actually a lot of times are more detrimental. But
Hey, Jazz, you don't have your headphones, do you, man?
but then my early 20s, much like my
Yeah.
dad, I thought the only way I could make it was originally tried to go in the military, but they found some stuff on a brain scan that they wouldn't let me in for because I was too much of a liability. So after that, I thought the only chance I've got of getting out of this is dealing drugs, and so I started doing things like cocaine and ecstasy and pain pills, but I started dabbling in that as well. And then so I battled a cocaine addiction for a while. Actually, I didn't battle it. I enjoyed it quite thoroughly until the day I finally didn't. And then, and it was really interesting because even, doctors at the time had me on 4 different prescriptions for anxiety and depression, even bipolar disorder, which I didn't have. And I quit all of that cold turkey, and I never had a true withdrawal symptom. Not from that. Now, food addiction, I did. That was the thing that was hardest for me, which it is for a lot of people because we have to eat, right, to stay alive. And our definition of food is, we've been trained by media and everything to look at it differently. A Twinkie is a nutritious meal in this country, it seems like to a lot. But I realized, I was like, how was I able to walk away from all that stuff just cold turkey? And that I realized it was like just something happened, and I reached that decision point, and to where I, burned the boats. And but it took me quite a long time to get to that point. Way longer than anyone should be in that realm. But luckily for me, it was long enough ago. I've corrected all that, and health-wise and everything else, and I'm healthier now than I've ever been. My doctor's younger than me, and he's still confused how I'm able to do it on this type of eating style. But he said, "Man, you're 10 years older than me, and your cholesterol's better, your health's better." Like, what the hell is up? So I've done everything I could to, remedy that and repair any damage done. But yeah, I modeled that behavior quite well because, like I said, that's the only men I grew up around were from that world. And even after my dad passed away, my mom ended up with one of his party buddies who was actually one of the biggest druggies he knew. So the first 20 years of my life, every man I was around was that type of person, dealing with their own stuff. So there was a huge part of my programming that believed, okay, this is how men are. Like they all were high functioning, so they all worked really hard. So it's like, okay, I'll work myself to death, and then I'll do all this other stuff to kill myself as well. And that's what happiness is for a man. I didn't have another perception. And that's a lot of the work I've started doing on this as a little side passion project now is actually men's coaching and teaching men how to be good fathers and everything and good mentors through healing themselves and passing it on.
I want to, because you mentioned diet, I didn't hear what your diet was. I'm assuming you're in a carnivore community, so I'm assuming it's probably meat-based, but can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, highly meat-based. I have the occasional cheat meal or birthday celebration or whatever, because my wife's European, so she still gets into a lot of that. But since my mid-20s, I had a roommate in my early to mid-20s who, it's really ironic that I even listened to him because he was quite pudgy and overweight and never really was any sign of health. But he introduced me to, he brought up Atkins. I didn't know what the hell Atkins was at the time, but then he introduced me to a book called Protein Power. And I remember reading it, and it was talking about all the the indigenous people of Alaska and everything. They used to be called Eskimos. I know that's not proper term anymore, but it's what I grew up hearing them described as. But talking about how it's all meat and high fat diet, and there's no heart disease, there's no tooth decay, and all this. And it blew me away. So I bought the pocket version of that, and I would carry it around with me. And as I started eating lower carb, I noticed I stopped getting sick. I was shredding fat like crazy compared to anything else I'd done. At the time, I was still drinking quite a bit. And I remember that was one of the things that excited me actually about the diet was, man, I get to eat my favorite food, which is like wings and steak, but also I can still drink liquor because there's no sugar in it. And yeah, but that was where my thinking was at. But I got enough improvement out of it, and I was a diet soda. I became a diet soda junkie and all this other stuff. But once in a while, through the years, I would start getting curious. It's like, I wonder what would happen if I just went with all meat, because that's the only thing I really enjoy anyway. And I would notice how much better I felt. And even though everybody around me was telling me I was insane, even though the other people I'd met who were on, versions of low carb, whether it was Atkins or keto or, whatever it was. And so I would still listen to them, because I was still dealing with my self-esteem issues. So I would listen to others better, but I always stayed in a high protein, higher fat, lower carb life. And anytime I went away from that, that's when joint pains and old injuries would start popping up, and, inflammation and especially sinus issues for me. But yeah, the last, I guess, 3 years, been rather strict of more of the carnivore, like, read your book, started following you early on when you were created your Instagram post and everything else, and or Instagram page. And yeah, I can tell really quick if I start going off of that, how my body reacts. There's a couple of things that I can eat outside of it, but very, very few things. It works really well for me. And then even in my kids, as I've adjusted their dieting to it, my 13-year-old, when I got custody of him and moved back to the area where we live now. I actually moved from California to here because my kids were here about 3 years ago. He had this open wound on his hand that like covered his whole area, and it was where he had poison ivy the year before, and it never healed. It was just this, it looked like a ton of scar tissue and these open wounds all the way down through, like huge craters and cracks in the skin. But his mom and even my mom, like, his mom and my mom, we all, or his mom and I come from families of just horrible nutrition. And so everybody's feeding him, lunch would be Doritos and pretzels, maybe some peanut butter for some protein, and that was literally considered a meal. So when I started adjusting his diet, and he actually wouldn't eat anything except for that type of stuff, just junk food. He couldn't, if he put a piece of grilled chicken in his mouth or a piece of steak or hamburger, he would gag and sometimes threw up. So it took me well over a year to just start sneaking in a little at a time and a little at a time. And now he's highly meat-based, and it's interesting, that wound that had been there for well over a year at the time, healed in like maybe 45 days. And he saw that, and it really started opening his mind up. So he started shifting his diet, and he got more into fitness, and now he has his own fitness channel on YouTube and Instagram. But then as he followed it more, he always, every single day he had a cough. He was always like, hundreds of times a day, sniffling all day. He always seemed like he had the sniffles or a cold or something. And, as a kid, he had so many ear infections and sinus infections. It was, we used to joke just to kind of ease the pain a little bit, but it was like, you could set the calendar. It was like the first week of the month, he was going to have a sinus infection. Second week was one ear infection. The third week was the next one. And then it would start over, it'd be both ears and not the nose, And now I can't even remember the last time he's been sick. It's been at least 18 months. And so just seeing my own feeling, but then watching the shift in him, it's like, oh yeah, this is the way to go. And, made me just dive deeper and deeper into it. And he's been fascinated with it. So he's still, every day he's trying to introduce a new food to himself, or every week, like now he's trying to get a love of eggs. So he's all excited because he can eat 3 eggs at a time now and not be sick and not get queasy or whatever from the texture and all that. But he was doing 1 egg for like 3 months straight, just every day. And it would take him an hour to eat. Now he can eat 3 in like 5 minutes, and he's like all proud of himself. But so and my youngest is, wasn't nearly as bad with limited palate and everything. But yeah, each of them have adjusted onto it, because my middle son he would break out in rashes and hives and things, and his elbows would look like alligator skin or something. And because it was that junk food diet, you know, typical American kids. Oh, just grab a snack. Hey, we're going hiking, grab a snack, you know, some pretzels and Nutella and sure, you know, whatever it was. And so yeah, now the whole family's been much more meat based, but I would say I'm 90% meat based. Let's say I do fluctuate a little bit, or my wife will make a special dish that she wants to share with me that, you know, she grew up on, because she grew up in Estonia, then Israel, then Canada, and then came to the States. So she has all these different meals she likes to make once in a while. And so I'll get a little relaxed just to keep the relationship better. But for the most part, yeah, I stay that point. And this was the only lifestyle I ever ate that I didn't have any cravings. You know, there was the habit to break, but like now, even if I think about having, like we're going, you know, for Memorial Day, we're going to my mom's house. She's having a ton of people over and having a big cookout. And when I think about the menu that's going to be there, I actually get a little nauseous. So I'm bringing my own stuff, so I don't have to, you know, force myself through that. It's like I can't even do it anymore. It's like because of knowing how good I feel now. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's got to be, you know, I mean, knowing what you did growing up, and you know, you see kids that are kind of, you see what road they're going down, and then being able to fix them and let them discover what's healthy is, I mean, that is just such a wonderful gift that you know, you know, because you got kids now that are like, hey, I know how to be healthy. And many people maybe spend decades, maybe in their whole life, and never figuring that out. And so it's good that they learn that. Or I wish I would have learned this stuff, you know,
Yeah.
30, 40 years ago. Gosh, I would have, you know, probably avoided some things. I fortunately, I was always kind of wired to be an athlete and think about health, but I didn't understand that like I do now. And let me get back to the, you know, because you talk about men in particular, you know, you're trying to help out with men, and, you know, obviously men and women are not the same. I mean, despite some of the, I don't know, the recent trends here, but there are some differences. And what are some of the unique things that you see that men have? What are some of the unique obstacles that men have to struggle with that maybe, you know, females may not have to deal with, or you come to a different perspective? There's a different, it means something different to be a man than a woman. I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah. You know, it's funny because a lot of it is so similar. It's just the one real distinction is men don't feel comfortable going anywhere sharing. And like, you know, I started out, I didn't know where to go to like start learning. You know, it's like I've got 3 sons. How do I figure out how to teach them how to be healthy men? It's like I don't know. I know that what not to do. And it's like, so I'm doing the opposite of that. But it's like, you know, I wanted to get really dialed in. It's like I don't want to just be trying to walk away from what I don't want them to be. It's like I want to actually have somewhere to aim. And then as I started, you know, diving into it and finding different books and studies and things, started realizing there's a lot. You know, that's the pandemic. You know, it's the COVID thing. I don't buy into the marketing, but it's you get into these like men's workshops and things, and you would hear so many men sharing the exact same thing, and get very emotional because like, man, I thought I was the only one. And I say, you know, I never talk to anybody because it's because sharing your emotions makes you soft or whatever. And it's like, look, we're men and we're women, and you know, however you identify in between, but it's like we're all people. We have emotions. We're designed that way, and they serve a purpose. And that's a big part of, you know, women tend to be more or have more permission to share that and talk about it, and men tend to be looked at, or at least have the idea of like, if I have emotions, if I even have them, not even share them, but it's like if I even have them, that means I'm soft. That means I'm weak. It's like, so I've got to hide it even more. And you know, a lot of us, I learned how to shave because of Danny Glover in Lethal Weapon 3. You know, I didn't grow up with anybody telling me how to do anything. So Father's Day, I always would make, like I still do on social media, I make a post thanking him, because it's like, that was the first time I really realized, I was like, wait a minute, there are good dads out there. You know, it's like, I've got to learn some stuff and teach it and pass it on. And I literally didn't shave until I was like 38 years old, because I didn't know the proper way really to do it. But yeah, all these men's groups I've been a part of or run or whatever, it's always it's that, you know, there's a lot of there's so much sexual abuse for women growing up, and it's horrible, and dealing with as adults. But it still blows my mind how often it actually happens to men. I actually know personally and have worked with more men who have been sexually abused in childhood years or teenage years than I do women. But it's no one knows about it because men are terrified to share it. Or if they do, I know a guy who was in a sexual relationship with his teacher when he was, like 13, 14 years old. And she was older than him, and he was pressured into it and scared. And every time he brought it up to anyone in his family, they're like, well, what's wrong with you, man? And he's sissy. It's like, yeah, it's sex, and it's like that, but it's like it messed him up, and I guess it's men feeling they're allowed to share and then being able to step into it and do it and realize, that's actually the real strength. It's like the reason why you don't want to share it and be vulnerable is because that shit's terrifying. But once you do it in the right environment, it's like, it's so freeing and so empowering. And I find so many people dealing with different traumas and different emotional stuff, and they cover it up with their eating habits or some form of addiction, is trying to fill that void. And it's like, man, being able to share that stuff and release it, it's amazing how freeing and empowering that can be for men. Just whether it's a group or having a buddy or whatever. But most men, they did a poll 2 or 3 years ago, and of men 25 and older, and less than 50% of them, they were trying to recognize like how many have someone they call a best friend, and most of them couldn't even call a best friend. So they were, name a best friend. And they're like, okay, name a really good friend. And they're like, someone you can talk to about stuff besides sports and yard work and how many girls you banged. And less than 50% could actually name someone they considered a true friend that they could actually share stuff with. And that leads into men are the leading group for suicide, but also heart disease and stress related things, because they're packing all that in and then try to compensate by drinking more or eating more or whatever. And that to me is one of the biggest epidemics that we've got to deal with. But unfortunately, the marketing and the money and the profit is bigger on the other side. So, big pharma and everything else just dive into creating pills for it and all of that. But that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, I would certainly, I don't discount that at all. I mean, I find, as a male, I would think, who would I talk to? And I really don't, I can't say I've got somebody that I could lean on if I needed to. I mean, I usually talk to things with my girlfriend typically when I usually bounce stuff off of, but I can't say I've got another guy that I would be comfortable sharing this sort of stuff. It is. I mean, it's a real issue for most men out there. So I think it's interesting. You said, you hear the same thing over and over again. I mean, you talked about the sexual abuse and stuff like that, but what other kind of issues do you see? And let me ask you about, not everybody has had some kind of trauma, but there's a lot of people that are, a lot of people that have that, or, they kind of, I guess all of us have experienced some negative thing in our life. I mean, whether it's physical trauma or emotional trauma or losing whatever, losing a loved one, that happens to pretty much everybody at some point. And some people it's much horrible than others. You have somebody sexually abused, that's absolutely horrible. But what makes some people able to deal with, hey, my dad died and I'm not effed up, versus other people that, what do you see in common that changes one person's response versus the other?
Yeah, for one thing, on the I've worked with a lot of people like PTSD and stuff. Then I've worked with a lot of people who have it and didn't realize it. It's the way it's talked about a lot, but it's because most people think PTSD is only war veterans and or trauma in general. It's like you've either got to have been abused, raped, or been to war to experience trauma. And it's like, trauma's in the eye of the beholder. It really is. There's you see a kid have a meltdown in a store because their parents said no about a toy, or they threw their pacifier out the window. Any parent that's experienced that, that's a form of trauma to that kid, and it gets stored in the neurology there. A lot of one of the like kind of most mind-boggling things I learned I mean, honest, if you watch animals in nature, a cheetah will chase a gazelle. Dr. Peter Levine did a lot of work on this. And I was talking about if the gazelle gets away, the outruns the cheetah or whatever, because cheetahs are the fastest, yet they can only do sprints. They can't run for long term. So the gazelle, as long as they can stay ahead of it just long enough, it's more long-winded creature. So once it gets out of the range of the cheetah, it stops, does this little like quivering thing, this little shimmy shake thing, and then does some panting. And whenever we experience trauma, like we actually naturally do it. Babies do it through crying, and then kids, you watch anyone, if someone's going in for a big interview or going to speak in front of a group, they start shaking a little bit. And we say it's nerves. Well, it is, but it's actually the body trying to process that emotion. But we're taught, men and women, a lot of times we're like, hey, just relax, chill out, get it together. It's seen as a weakness. And if we actually, there was a psychological study done last year, I believe it was, or the year before. COVID calendars kind of messed up my time frame over the last 2 years. But they said if we actually allow ourselves to sit with the emotion when it comes up, that within 15 to 20 seconds, the worst part of it is done. Because like we have emotions for a reason, and it's to process all that stuff and to pass it through. But we're told things, especially as men, it's like, suck it up, boys don't cry, or all that other stuff. And we're taught to pack it in, and it actually gets stored in our neurology. We have our neurological system runs entirely through through every cell of the body. Depending on what study you read, some say we have 4 trillion cells throughout our body. Others say 400 trillion cells. But every one of those cells, every time we have a thought or an emotion or an experience, every one of those cells experience it as well. And it can actually get stored and stuck throughout the neurology, through all those cells. And then it starts, forming things. And that's why heart attack rate goes up Monday mornings, from, I think it's 7 to 9 a.m. is the window. It jumps up over 30%. It's because people are so stressed out about going to their job, and they're sitting in traffic, and most people are going to a job they hate, and they just get so stressed out about where they're going and what they're going to have to deal with, that their heart pretty much literally jumps up and attacks them, basically. And it's like, I don't want to go. It's like, I don't want to keep putting myself through this. And because we don't have that outlet, and this, and especially a lot of us learn how to be men, especially people who grew up without a father figure present all the time, whether they were at work all the time or just not in the picture. Most of the men we saw on TV were either the Jim Carrey character of like really goofy and just silly, or it was the opposite side, and it was the Rambo and Commando and Meyer of just the strong silent type doing everything solo. And the only emotion you express is anger, and when you get mad, people get their ass kicked, and that's it. But business gets handled. But there's rarely ever that that time permitted to actually go through the emotions and actually experience it. And that's what I see as so many guys is because also in society, we're also told not to get mad, not be explosive. And so that builds up until it does become explosive. And so it's one of the first things I end up doing with a lot of clients is give them permission. It's like, if you're in your car and traffic is just really getting under your skin that day, or, something at work or whatever it is, it's like, just sit in your car, he'll pull over. If you can get out where nobody can see you, great. If not, it doesn't matter, the heck with them. It's like, just do what's called a primal scream. It's like just something to get some of that energy out. And it is amazing how actually freeing that can be. It's like, if you don't want to scream, just pound the steering wheel a little bit, do something to get it out. It's like, we'll get you to a healthier point later, but it's like in the moment, allow it to process. And if you can help it get out, it's like, take some breaths, do something, pound the steering wheel, or just shake, or do something. But it's, we're just like every other animal in nature. They all have that. But like I say, it's taken out of us over time. It's trained out of us by, stop fidgeting, stop shaking, boys don't cry, like suck it up, just move on. And it's if we just give ourselves that 15 to 20 seconds to allow it to process and do its thing, it's like the body and mind know exactly what to do. We just got to free it up, and that's part of the diet thing too, is by eating healthier so it functions better to do all that stuff. But yeah, a lot of times it's just getting out of our own way to allow it to do it.
Why do you think it is that, because this is something that is multi-generational, and maybe it's been going on for thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years, and men are trained to be tough, to be stoic, to do the hard work, to not complain. Why is that? Was there some advantage to that? I mean, was there an advantage to that at some point? Is it now that, I'm just thinking, like from a nutritional standpoint and a current, social situation, I can imagine, 50,000 years ago, or hunter gatherers, maybe there's not as much stress as far as the chronic stuff, and maybe your diet's better and you've got a better mental outlook. But was there a reason that men are, why aren't men constantly weeping and crying and holding hands and talking emotion? I mean, that we don't typically sort of correlate that with masculinity, even for thousands of years. And so why do we have this in men versus women? What do you think's the underlying principle of why we have that difference?
Yeah, it's been the joke since the dawn of time that any of us know of is, there's memes all the time about it, and cartoons and things of, the woman coming up to her man and dialoguing or monologuing for him. It drives my wife nuts because she does it. She'll monologue for 20 minutes and then I give like a 3-word response, and to me, it's like I answered everything in there. And it's been that joke of like women have a lot more to say and men don't. And yeah, going back to those, more tribal times and, generations ago, the difference being, Tony Robbins actually calls it the Meadow Report, but women go out and would, a lot of times with the gatherers, and they go out and they're talking about things that are going on in the tribe. They were raising the kids, they were keeping the history of the tribe, so to speak. And also, while they're gathering berries and everything, they would have these conversations of, oh, that's poisonous, that's not, that made so-and-so break out in hives, or whatever. There was much more detail needed. And they were monitoring things and also seeing if it was safe to go out. Men, on the other hand, tended to be in the warrior and hunter position. And if they made too much noise or they got emotional in there, it was detrimental, not just to themselves, not just to their brothers around them, but the entire tribe. If they didn't come back with food because they didn't get to kill, everybody could starve to death. If they were at war with another tribe and they got caught up in the emotion, same thing, the tribe could get wiped out through the war or battle, whatever it was. So they learned, for one, how, whether it's started that way or it was a learned habit, I don't really know, but it's been passed down genealogical, of learning how to speak shorter, quicker, get to the point. Men tend to, when they're listening to their partners or females in general, it's like, what's the point? Get to the point. Because of that, being in those environments where it's like, we can't make a lot of noise and we've got to keep it together. But then, the thing that they had that was different, because we can't have an emotional breakdown in the middle of a business meeting, whether you're a man or a woman. It's not seen as professional nowadays. People aren't going to see it as strength. They're not going to count on you as much and all of that. So, and again, it was a survival thing out in the battlefield or out in the field hunting. But when they would come back, there was, they come back with the win of, the fight being over, or they come back with the kill of the day. And there's a ceremony and there's all that. And there was also time for men to process it. Like, one of the things I first learned when I went down this path that really opened my mind up was, in Western civilization especially, but whenever we have emotion come up, everybody's had the experience of driving down the road and everything's great. And then there's a song comes on or something happens and they start getting really emotional. Or, they're at work or they're at home and something happens and it triggers that. We've all had that experience and we tend to try to shove it back down, right? In North America, especially, we're taught to take a prescription pill or have another drink or maybe smoke a cigarette or eat something that makes us feel better, whatever it is. But we pack that emotion back down. But in indigenous cultures, and like Hawaii is where I first heard about it at, but found out it pretty much happens in indigenous cultures all around the world. The less civilized group who tend to have the better diets and health and everything else. But they, when baggage would come up like that, the tribe actually would throw a ceremony because like in Hawaii, they call it the inihupili, as the subconscious mind. And they celebrate because they're like, okay, that's the subconscious mind's way of bringing it to your attention. So, you've learned what you needed to learn from it. Now it's time to release and let that shit go. But like I say, in North America, we're seeing it as, oh, we got emotion. That's weakness. I got to shove it back down. So in those, generations ago, when they would come back from the war, the hunt or whatever, any of that stuff, they would get with the tribe and they would, bring it up, and it wouldn't be, the men would gather and they would have their circles, or the whole tribe would, or whatever. And they would share the different things and they would talk about it, and that allowed it to process. We don't do that, right? We don't, especially in our time now, it's like we're busy all the time. So we don't ever allow ourselves to do that because it's not fun, right? I mean, let's face it, like no one wants to go through that emotional stuff, but it's like the freedom is on the other side of it. And, I know you mentioned like you don't really have anybody to share it with, but you do with your lady. And that's beautiful because a lot of times that's one of the another challenge I hear of men sharing is like, I can't in front of my woman because she'll see me as weak. I got to hold the space for her, but she can't hold it for me because I've got to be the man. I've got to have it together. So, and the fact that she can, still admire you and hold that space for you and understand that, like, that's signs of a really beautiful and strong relationship. It's like all relationships are going to have their challenges. We're human. We all want to be a spoiled kid somewhere in our life, but having that and understanding that and being able to hold that space for each other, that's a true partnership. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think this is because there's people and women appreciate men that are masculine, and they appreciate some of those aspects. And you're not saying to take away from that. I will comment on the primal scream or pounding on the steering wheel. I remember I did that once on the steering wheel, and I bent the damn steering wheel, so it didn't work out too well for me. So you can't hit it too hard because you'll F up the steering wheel. But yeah, I can see that sometimes. Just get out there and just. And honestly, I sometimes just take it out in the gym. I just go in there and
Yeah.
lift heavy crap, and that's therapy for me, I suppose. I mean, that works pretty well.
Yeah, me the same way. And I keep a punching bag hanging, and then I've got one laying on the ground. And I have the kids. They have these foam Nerf bats too, and I teach them the same thing. I'm like, whenever they're having a real emotional moment, whether they're stressed or sad or whatever, it's like give it a little time to process. It's like, all right, let's go out there and just let the bag have it. That's what it's here for. It's like get it out of you, and then we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. And that's really brought a huge connection and bond with my boys and I, especially like we have a communication that I never had with my dad. It was children are meant to be seen, not heard. So sit there, shut up, don't let me hear you. And this is totally different. My kids come to me about so much, and I'm so grateful for that. And a lot of it comes from those moments in the gym where it's like, come on, let's get that out. Let's go. And then we go on nature hikes all the time, and we'll do a primal scream like off the side of a mountain or something. And they love it. They ask for it all the time now. And it's funny. So it keeps me accountable to it as well, because it's super comfortable to them because they don't know any better anymore. But, I still have some of the old inhibitions of, not being seen out, in public sometimes, but they hold me accountable to it. So it's awesome. And actually doing it, keeping my kids along on the journey actually makes it easier for me to stay committed, to the work, because I can't punk out in front of them. Right? It's like, I've got to set the example of and be who I want them to show up as, that healthy man, and person in the world of, regardless of who they choose to be and how they, as long as they show up authentically as themselves. So keeps me on track as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Interesting you say, go out in the woods and do the primal scream. I think if you do it in a little neighborhood where there's a lot of houses around people, you might get the cops called on you or something like that, And so
we've had it happen.
If I scream at the top of my lungs, my neighbors probably going, they might be scared to come over, or what the cops might show up. But, and you sense it, I don't want to punk out. So it's kind of interesting, even though you're talking about allowing men to be, at times of, breaking down, but at the same time, you still have this, you want to set the good example. You still want to be considered I guess a man who is able to accomplish things. I think that's something we all have. Most of us don't like to fail. Most of us have this. I don't think anybody does, but I think, you feel like you've got, I mean, it's just a different pressure, I think, that most of us have. Let me, this has been great. Unfortunately, we're already flew through an hour, Kip, and I've got to go do something else, unfortunately. But tell me, let us know where people can go to find out more about what you do, or maybe your social media, that type of stuff.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Kip Brooks, also Brooks Empowerment Academy. You can search that way and find me. I'm in a World Carnivore Tribe group on Facebook. It's one of like 3 groups that I actually pay attention to on Facebook. Yeah, reach out to me. And actually, I was thinking of doing I have a workshop I'm mapping out right now, and next week I'll have the answer of actually when it's going to be. But reach out to me. And get you guys an invitation link to come to it. We're going to do a mini workshop online, and we're thinking about it's going to be based on the mental and emotional drivers we all have, and talk about a lot of that stuff. But we were thinking about making one of the key things is because overeating and nutrition is such a thing for people. So go into like the mental emotional drives that cause us to sabotage a diet, or cause the food addictions. And it's even going to do a couple of demos to show people, I mean, you can release food addiction literally in 30 seconds if you know how to do it. So I was thinking about pulling some demos from the crowd, and it's going to be an online virtual workshop. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me. If you think I'm a kook, you think I'm crazy, I'll take those responses as well. There's no failure, there's only feedback. But yeah, reach out to me, any questions, any comments, whatever. I hope this, added a little bit of value to your tribe. And Shawn, I love the work you're doing. Thank you so much for making me realize I'm not the only nut job out there believing this stuff works. So yeah, I love what you're doing, and I'm really honored to be a part of this. And thank all you guys for attending, and everybody in the chat that's been throwing in stuff. I love it. Appreciate it.
Well, likewise, Kip, we appreciate what you do, and look forward to more from you down the road, and good luck with what you do. And thanks for spending time with us. Okay, guys, absolutely. I got to run. We'll see everybody tomorrow. You guys have a great day. Or if not, I'll see you next. The weekend we're going into a long weekend, so Memorial Day is a good time to barbecue for sure. All right, guys, take care. I'll be back tomorrow. I'll see some of you guys. Bye bye.